At 4:30 a.m., Russia believed it still had the night. Missile crews were preparing what Moscow hoped would be the strike that would break Ukraine's will. Hangars across western Russia were packed with launchers, fuel vehicles, and missiles being rushed through final checks. In less than an hour, these weapons were supposed to plunge Ukrainian cities into darkness. What Russia didn't know was that the most dangerous part of the war had already begun. For months, the Kremlin had built its strategy around winter. The plan was brutally straightforward: destroy power stations, cripple heating networks, and force civilian pressure through cold and blackouts. If Ukraine froze, the battlefield wouldn't matter. The centerpiece of that plan was Russia's most feared missile system, the Iskander-M. The Iskander-M is designed to terrify. A massive mobile launcher capable of firing ballistic missiles at hypersonic speeds, it can strike hardened targets with precision and little warning. Russia treats these systems as strategic assets, symbols of power meant to deter enemies and dominate the battlefield. But no weapon is dangerous while it's moving, and no weapon is more vulnerable than when it stopped. As winter approached, Russian commanders rushed to prepare a nationwide missile surge. Launchers were pulled back from hidden field positions and concentrated into maintenance hubs. Missiles needed inspection. Fuel systems had to be tested. Reload vehicles were positioned close to speed up launch cycles. Everything was optimized for efficiency. Almost nothing was optimized for survival. Instead of being scattered across forests and remote roads, Russia's missile force began clustering inside large hangars and logistics depots. To Moscow, these locations felt safe. They were far from the front lines, wrapped in layered air defenses, protected by modern radar and powerful electronic warfare systems. What Russian planners underestimated was how visible that concentration had become. For nearly 4 days, Ukrainian intelligence quietly watched. Reconnaissance drones flew high and slow, blending into civilian air traffic. Satellites tracked thermal signatures from generators, engines, and fueling operations. Analysts mapped hangar layouts, counted launchers, and timed maintenance cycles down to the minute. When the analysis was complete, a clear picture emerged. 5 locations mattered more than all the others combined: Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod, Rostov, Crimea. Together, these bases formed the backbone of Russia's planned winter missile campaign. From these hubs, launchers could strike deep into Ukraine's energy infrastructure. If they stayed operational, Ukraine would face weeks of darkness and cold. But there was a problem. Russia's air defenses were among the densest in the world. S-400 systems, panzer units, layered radar coverage, and aggressive jamming platforms created what Moscow believed was an impenetrable shield. Any conventional strike would be detected and destroyed long before reaching its target. Ukraine understood that brute force wouldn't work. This wouldn't be a battle of firepower. It would be a battle of attention. Ukrainian planners designed an operation not to smash Russia's defenses, but to distract them, overload them, and force them to fight threats that weren't real, while the real danger slipped through unnoticed. Everything depended on a narrow window. Just before sunrise, when launchers across multiple regions would be clustered, exposed, and mid-maintenance at the same time. That window was opening, and Russia was about to learn what happens when the strongest shield is pointed in the wrong direction. At 3:47 a.m., radar screens near Bryansk came alive. Operators inside Russian air defense bunkers leaned forward as contacts began appearing across their displays, fast, low, and approaching from multiple directions. Within seconds, the count climbed past 40, then 50, then more. To the crews watching, this looked like the opening phase of a major attack. Training manuals had a name for it. Alarms echoed through the bunker. Panzer air defense units powered up, radar arrays rotating as systems locked onto the incoming swarm. Interceptor missiles were armed. Autocannons began tracking automatically. The command came without hesitation. Fire! Missiles tore into the night sky, leaving bright trails behind them. Radar screens flashed as targets disappeared. Outside, the sky over Bryansk filled with explosions and tracer fire as cannons poured thousands of rounds into the darkness. From the ground, it looked like success. Russian crews watched contact after contact vanish. Confirmed kills stacked up. Radios buzzed with confidence. The defenses were holding. The threat was being destroyed. What they didn't realize was that they were winning the wrong fight. The first wave was never meant to survive. Ukraine's opening move relied on low-cost decoy drones, simple airframes, basic engines, and minimal guidance systems. Individually, they were insignificant. Their real value wasn't physical. It was psychological and electronic. Each decoy carried a small signal emitter tuned to imitate the radar signature of high-value weapons. To Russian sensors, these cheap drones looked like incoming cruise missiles, fast, lethal, and impossible to ignore. Air defense systems responded exactly as designed, and that response came at a cost. Every interceptor missile launched cost more than most civilian homes. Every burst of cannon fire burned through ammunition that couldn't be quickly replaced. In just minutes, Russian air defense units around Bryansk were draining resources at a rate that made no sense. Yet no one questioned it, because all attention was focused upward. While operators tracked targets exploding in the sky, something else was moving below their line of sight. Less than 150 feet above the ground, Ukrainian strike drones approached from the tree. Built from carbon composite materials, their radar signatures were minimal. Against terrain clutter and electronic noise, they were almost invisible. These drones didn't rush their targets. They waited. Their onboard systems scanned for specific indicators: heat from generators, the thermal patterns of missile cooling units, and the distinct shapes of launcher vehicles inside hangars. Inside one of Bryansk's maintenance facilities, several Iskander-M launchers sat mid-service. Missile canisters were open. Fuel lines were connected. Reload vehicles were parked nearby to save time. Efficient. Exposed. One strike drone climbed sharply, then tipped forward into a terminal dive. Instead of a conventional explosive, it carried a shape-charge warhead designed to focus its energy into a narrow jet. The hangar roof didn't slow it down. The jet punched through reinforced steel and detonated inside. Fuel ignited instantly. Missile propellant followed. In seconds, a chain reaction ripped through the structure. The hangar became an inferno. Vehicles collapsed inward. Secondary explosions blew out walls and sent debris flying across the base. Launchers and support vehicles were destroyed before anyone inside could react. As smoke began rising over Bryansk, Russian air defense crews believed they had stopped the attack. They had no idea their primary missile assets were already gone. And while Bryansk burned, radar screens hundreds of kilometers away were lighting up again. Kursk was about to face the same mistake. Only this time, Russia would try a different defense. As reports from Bryansk reached Russian command centers, disbelief set in. Radar logs showed a successful interception. Dozens of targets destroyed. On paper, the air defenses had performed flawlessly. But satellite imagery told another story. A missile facility was burning. Kursk's commanders were determined not to repeat what they believed had been a tactical oversight. When early warning alerts began appearing on their own screens, they chose a different approach, one built on electronic control rather than missile fire. Electronic warfare units were activated at full power. Within minutes, the airspace around Kursk became a digital blackout. GPS signals vanished. Navigation systems lost their reference points. From Russia's perspective, this should have ended the threat. Long-range drones depend on satellite guidance. Remove that, and they drift, crash, or miss completely. For a brief moment, it worked. The first incoming objects behaved erratically. Some slowed. Others wandered off course. Russian crews interpreted this as confirmation that the jamming was effective. Missile batteries held fire, conserving ammunition while waiting for the drones to fail on their own. Then a second wave appeared. 25 objects approached from the west, flying low and steady, completely unaffected by the electronic chaos surrounding them. Their paths were clean, deliberate. They were not behaving like systems dependent on GPS. Operators hesitated. Moments later, air defense units opened fire, engaging what they believed was the main threat. Interceptors streaked upward. Cannons roared. Once again, expensive defenses were being used on targets designed to absorb attention. The real danger was already inside the perimeter. Hours earlier, Ukrainian forces had quietly deployed small glider platforms far beyond the engagement zone. These gliders released tiny optical markers along pre-planned routes. Simple, almost invisible devices that projected faint visual reference points. The strike drones didn't need satellites. They followed those markers like a thread through the dark. Inside the Kursk missile depot, activity was intense. Several Iskander-M launchers were mid-reload, the most vulnerable phase of their operational cycle. Missiles were suspended by hydraulic arms. Fuel systems were pressurized. Support vehicles were parked dangerously close together to save time. Everything was optimized for speed. Nothing was optimized for survivability. A Ukrainian strike drone slipped past the perimeter and descended toward the reload zone. Its onboard systems ignored the electronic battlefield entirely. Instead, It locked onto a clear visual pattern, the silhouette of a transloader lifting a missile into position. The drone struck the hydraulic arm mid-hoist. Pressurized fluid ruptured instantly, atomizing into a fine mist. Contact with hot surfaces ignited it in seconds. Flames raced up the launcher's frame, reaching exposed propellant almost immediately. The explosion that followed didn't need to be massive. It was perfectly placed. Missile fuel ignited. Nearby warheads detonated. The shockwave tore through the depot, overturning vehicles and ripping storage racks apart. Secondary explosions followed in rapid succession, feeding the fire. Within moments, the reload area became an inferno. Multiple launchers were destroyed where they stood. Critical support vehicles were reduced to twisted wreckage. Missile stocks cooked off violently, forcing an emergency evacuation of the base. Kursk had been crippled without a single Ukrainian aircraft entering the airspace. No jets, no cruise missiles, just timing, deception, and precision. Russian commanders were now facing a pattern they could no longer ignore. This wasn't luck. It was a campaign, and the next phase would test whether adaptation could stop it. Belgorod was already adjusting its defenses, and farther south, something much larger was moving toward Rostov. By the time smoke rose from Kursk, Russian commanders accepted a hard truth. Their defenses were being outthought. This was no longer a series of isolated strikes. It was a coordinated effort designed to expose how modern air defense systems fail under pressure. Belgorod became the testing ground for adaptation. Instead of reacting to every radar contact, air defense crews were ordered to change doctrine. Radar sensitivity was reduced. Automated engagement was limited. Optical and thermal tracking systems were prioritized, forcing operators to visually confirm targets before firing. The logic was sound. Decoys could fool radar. They were far less effective against the human eye and infrared sensors at close range. When the first wave arrived, Belgorod held its fire. Dozens of decoy drones crossed the engagement zone without triggering a response. Operators tracked them calmly as they passed overhead and drifted away. Then the strike drones came. Low, fast, and deliberate, they approached through urban terrain and tree cover. This time, they met prepared defenses. Thermal imagers locked on instantly. Autocannons rotated and fired controlled bursts. 3 drones were destroyed mid-approach. A 4th lost control under localized jamming. A 5th detonated prematurely after taking damage. Only 1 reached its target, and even that strike caused limited damage. Belgorod survived. Within command channels, relief turned into confidence. Reports described a successful defense. Losses were minimal. The new approach appeared to work, but survival was mistaken for victory. Belgorod faced a small attack by design. It was never meant to break the base. It was meant to confirm a response. And now Ukraine had the data. Engagement timing, ammunition consumption, sensor limitations, human reaction speed. Every tracer round and every intercepted drone had revealed something valuable. Those lessons were applied immediately. Rostov was different. Unlike previous targets, Rostov wasn't just a launch site. It was a logistics nerve center. Fuel depots, reload vehicles, missile storage, and command elements were concentrated into a single operational area. If Rostov fell, downstream operations across the region would collapse. Shortly before 4 a.m., radar screens began to saturate. Not dozens, scores. Drones appeared from every direction at multiple altitudes. Some flew erratically. Others maintained clean, disciplined paths. Operators struggled to classify targets fast enough to decide what to engage. There was no single threat to prioritize. This time, the attack wasn't about deception. It was about volume. Air defense systems fired continuously. Missiles launched in rapid succession. Cannons overheated. Reload crews rushed to keep up. Commanders tried to regain control, but the flow never slowed. Behind the chaos, strike drones moved freely. They targeted fuel first. Explosions tore through storage areas, ripping open hangars and exposing everything inside. Fire spread rapidly, turning maintenance zones into open targets. With defenses fully committed elsewhere, there was no response left. One by one, launchers and support vehicles were destroyed. By the time the sky cleared, Rostov was no longer a functioning hub. As dawn approached, the pattern was undeniable. This wasn't about destroying every missile. It was about breaking the system that supported them. Russia had adapted, but adaptation had only delayed the outcome. Because no defense, no matter how advanced, can stop an attack that arrives everywhere at once. And by sunrise, Russia's winter missile campaign was already over.